On March 14th, 2015, a group of over 50 deer habitat enthusiasts followed habitat expert Jim Ward on a tour of Andy Hayes' 63-acre Indiana property.
Did they mow that down?
I was telling Andy I brought my
You can already see, it looks like we're already starting to get some green up already, which is encouraging. Hopefully it's going to come up fast. This is what we call the east plot. It's broken up into two sections here. In 12, I shot my buck out of that tree right over there. He came into the field grunting. That's one thing that I use cameras like crazy, and I'm sure a lot of you do. I have had really good luck patterning bucks with trail cameras, and one of the things I do, even during the rut in the middle of the season, is I will check the cameras daily. In fact, the bucks I've killed the last 2 years, and we'll get up here to the watering hole, I've been able to pattern in the middle of the rut based on pictures that I pulled the day before. So, you know, if you hear a lot of guys say, well, I don't want to go in and hit my cameras, do this and that, those cameras tell you all type of information. And for me, if I'm not hitting them, then I don't know what's out there. And last 2 years, I've called Jim the night before and said, Jim, I think this buck's doing this. I think I got a shot of getting him tomorrow. And I called Jim the next day and say, I got it done. And he's.
And so cameras, I'm not a big fan of cameras, so it's a little different style. I used to sell the Buckeye cam nationally, and it was the first one that would transmit the picture back to your phone or your computer. And so Andy's key to this, though, is his scent control, his ground scent, where he's walking around on the property and he's not leaving stink out here for 6 to 8 hours later because he's so good on his scent control now. And you can pick the camera chips up on the way back from your stand. And so, and the other thing that he mentioned about patterning them like that, what I feel happens during season is it's about a 2 or maybe a 3 day pattern max. And so early season, I think a lot of times you can get a 4 to 5 day pattern, 3 to 4 day pattern anyways. And then during season, because of chasing or other activity that's going on, testosterone's changing, food sources are changing, so many things are happening, it's a short window. So if you're checking them on the weekend and think you're going to come back out the next weekend and kill that buck, it's typically not the case, and that's what a lot of people do. Write that information down for next year. You might be able to jump out there in advance of that information and be ready for them, but I rarely see somebody get a picture on a Sunday night. The next weekend they think they're going to come out and kill that deer. It rarely happens. So
I'm trying to change Jim's thought process on that. But
I'll tell you, there's guys that are using them off season now in August. They'll take 6 bags of corn out, 6 cameras, put them across the property. The buck uses camera number 2. They pull up all the other cameras. They surround that with 5 bags of corn and 5 cameras. Then the buck hits 2, 4, and 5 or whatever, and they come up with a pattern off season that deer is doing. And that seems to be a useful thing. But to get random photos, you know, what I told people for years is if it's a 5.5-year-old deer, I don't really care if it's an 8-pointer or a 10. 5.5, I'm going to shoot it, you know. So everybody has different ideas. I used to be addicted to getting the photo. That's the reason I sewed cameras with Buckeye Cam. But I would chase that deer around the property with my cameras, and next thing you know, it was hurting me bad. So everybody has their own methods. Everybody kills deer. The guys I see consistently kill big bucks every year. Every one of them does it at their special time of the year and with their method. So hopefully what we can do today is connect the dots for some of your information that you already have and open up the big picture a little bit more. Again, my special time is the 9th to the 12th of November. The next guy is Halloween weekend. The next guy is the 25th to the 29th of October. Everybody's got their special time and their special method. And main reason is because that's when they enjoy hunting and they spend more time out there, so they've been able to repeat those tactics and get better because they can repeat them. And I think that's when you get to be good at what you're doing. This plot here was a arrow seed. It's red clover, a medium red, white clover, and it had alfalfa in it, but there's not much alfalfa left. So people talk a lot about white clover, but red clover is very attractive to deer also.
Will you rotate these plots, Andy, or do you kind of keep them in the same thing every year?
We've been talking. That's a good question, Mr. Twitchell. We've rotated. Yes, we rotate, but I will keep these in for at least 2 to 3 years on clover and chicory.
I don't know why it is. After your 3rd year on a clover plot, the attraction really goes downhill. I don't understand what the reason is in it, but it sure does. So a lot of guys know that you can spray Roundup over top of white clover early in the year and kill all the weeds out of it, and come back like crazy, a lot thicker. But if they're not coming to it after the 4th or 5th year, I think you ought to get rid of it and do something different.
This was a low area that we had, and was always collecting water, and I thought, you know what, it'd be nice if I had a water source here. So I came out and just started pulling out dirt, and it's probably a couple of feet deep. One of the key learnings that I've had over the past couple of years is when I first did it, I didn't compact it down, and I used my box blade so it had the tines, and as soon as I get a good rain, those tines had enough surface area it was seeping through the clay. So I got some bentonite, got a compactor, came in, put some bentonite down, compacted it, and it did real well that first year. The second year, with all the deer going in there and their hoof prints, it created that surface area again where the water was seeping through, so I had to do it over again. So my plan this year, once it dries out, is to put more bentonite and try to till it up and get the bentonite a little bit deeper into it so it'll hold and get it below. So that's one of the things that I've learned, and I'm going to try, and I'll post the results online, but a lot of water. So there's the box blind I built. I did that in 2010. It was kind of a personal project I wanted to get started on. Bailey shot her first deer off of that during youth season, and that same year. We didn't even have the walls up yet. We put a ground blind up. We had the platform up, and she shot it. We got out here late, and she shot it within 10 minutes of us sitting. So kind of spoiled her. It was pretty quick for her to get a deer. And then you've probably seen online, Luke shot his buck this year out of that blind too. What's interesting is the first buck I shot on this property, I shot in a stand off of the woods, but on the edge of that main plot. So it's kind of a neat thing for our family. All 3 of us got our first deer on this property, and those bucks, all 3 of those bucks were probably killed within a 50-yard area. This is a trail, connecting trail. This is where it's going to get narrow. We're going to go a little bit, and then to the left is a big rub. I want you guys to see this.
I see a lot of people use all different types of little water tanks. And even though you got a creek on the property, even though you got a pond on the property, they still want to use these little spots. So the more you can put around for a pattern, to build a pattern for the deer to follow instead of guessing what pattern the deer is on, the more beneficial you're going to be. He was talking about, do people get busted walking in? Everybody gets busted walking in. Surprise, right? So 117-foot tower, we went down to Florida, took 3 of them down, brought them back to Iowa and set up so I could sit there at 117 feet up on the edge of the property and watch everybody go to the tree stands, right? And so when you don't see a tail running through the woods, it doesn't mean you haven't been busted. And does are going to bed for food. And if you got the edge of your food plot wide open, you're getting busted. Just want to make sure everybody understands, just because you don't see the deer doesn't mean that they haven't nailed you. And the thicker you have your property, typically the does are not going to leave that property, they're going to make a little circle. So, I mean, we can make this sound as secretive or as sneaky as we possibly can, but the facts are, they're going to see you no matter what you do because they're that good at it, right? And we can come up with the most important things are scent free, so that you're not casting stink for 400 yards out across your property when you're walking in, and don't break sticks. Squirrels break leaves, smash leaves, deer don't even look at them. They can understand the difference in the weight of the animal breaking the stick because of the snap, right? So if you can rake out your trail or leaf blow it in September, even though you're going to get more leaves on it, you're going to get the sticks out of there. And if you make much noise, you stop. We're the only animal in the world that just walks stumps all the way through the timber. Whether you're a squirrel, a rabbit, a coyote, a deer, whatever it is, everything stops every few steps, looks around, takes a few more steps. And so if you can come up with those same noises, you can make noise in the woods and get away with it a lot of times. So
Alright, staging area, we're going to hit up over there. We found that rub last year. And they hit it again.
I'm not a big fan of late season.
We found it in winter of 14 and they hit it again hard in the fall. Jump. We do cut some good trees if we think it's necessary and it's going to give us that habitat and that structure that we need for our bedding area. But there's no way we can cut all of our good trees. We think it's helping our mature trees get up, and we're creating that sunlight getting to where we can get those trees to grow. Because right now, if you look, and that's the other thing, we want high stem count, so you're going to hear us talk about stem count a lot. We want it to be thick and woolly through here. Some guys want their place to look like a state park. That doesn't do any good as far as I'm concerned for deer habitat. Around a little bit as we go through here, because some people have said, you're having all these people walk through, you're going to blow all your deer out. They know me, they hear me, they're kind of used to this. We're just going to move them from place to place, but they've got the stem count that they need to have that comfort level. I don't have a fear of pushing them onto other property at this point. And if they do, I can't control that anyway. We want to make it as thick and woolly as we can, so when the time is right, I got the doe stacked in here, and when it comes hunting season, this is where the bucks are going to be hanging out. Both. The question was, do we hinge cut for cover or browse? We do it for both.
Which trees do they prefer browsing on?
They want to browse on mainly your softwoods. They want a hickory tree this time of the year. They're going to browse hard. It's the only time I see them hit a hickory tree. But your gray dogwood here, your elm is #1 deer browse. Hard maple, hackberry is like number 3 or 4 on the list. The important thing that you're seeing in here is this vine honeysuckle that's growing in here, and as we hinge these trees over, it's going to canopy up over top of all this. Vine honeysuckle in some places is 40% of a deer's diet, which is unbelievable. There's not another plant out there that's 40% of a deer's diet. So you can have wide open timber that takes 25 acres to produce enough food for 1 deer for year round. You get 4 acres of thick with high stem count. That's enough for 1 deer for year round. So you can have 6 times more deer on a property by getting the browse down in their face. I went to Dr. James Crow, Dr. Deer's class in 2003. He walked around for 3 days like this. All this down here is everything a deer can reach, and every wild animal that we're after, every game animal, and all that up there is squirrels and hoot owls. What do you want on your property? Squirrels and hoot owls? Or do you want every game animal out there? Quail, turkey, deer, grouse. So again, this vine honeysuckle, they call it invasive, but as you can see, it doesn't go but about 12-15 feet up a tree, and the vine's not heavy enough for it to continue on. So we tip these over, we get sunlight in here, and this is bush honeysuckle, which you have to watch all these invasives. As you start cutting a property, you get more sunlight in here, and this is bush honeysuckle. And it's one of the most invasive plants going, but they love it. You can see where they've been browsing on this one in multiple places. I don't know of 2 plants that can produce more food in a timber than these 2 plants here that they like. And so I cut all these off every year, and you can cut that every year and not kill it. And so, but it won't reproduce seed if you cut it every year. So you keep it down in their face, you keep the seed from being reproduced, and you control it that way. If you don't have it now on your property, you will have it on your property. Hinge cut these trees to where along the outside edges they're face high, and then drop the ones behind it on top of those stumps. Now you've created your overhead canopy. The key to bedding situations, you'll see some guys talk about, well, you don't need to make beds, blah, blah, blah. Well, the whole key is they got daytime food, they got screening cover, they got a flat spot that they can lay down without any sticks in it, and some type of side cover. And so that would be a scenario here. We haven't made a bed up underneath here, but this is very bed looking material here. There's a good chance deer will move into that. Do we need to enhance it? It would help to enhance it. Move the sticks out of the way and put a log there. If we do this across the entire property, do I need to come in here and construct beds? You're going to have deer whether you do it or not. You know, the videos you guys have seen me do is 3 or 4 hinge cut trees. That's great. They'll last a couple of years. It's going to work. But the more of this you do,
you don't necessarily have to get in there and construct beds, because you've got hundreds or thousands of situations that these natural vines are going to canopy over. If you just clean out from underneath it, they're going to dive into it. So there's no magic on making beds. We're creating opportunities to get them in a spot. And once you know where they're at, you can get closer to where you're wanting to hunt them. I like to hunt 75 yards from where my buck's bedded at. Everybody has their own method. Above the deer's eyes to where they feel comfortable, and get sunlight down to the ground to where we got natural plants come in for diversity for year-round food. And so however you want to do that, that's the key to them. That way you have more deer on the property to where they're not interacting with each other all the time. But again, the whole idea is, this property's laid out, as you see on the map, a bunch of fingers that go west. And the creek is at the end of all those fingers. So instead of those bucks getting up off the ends of these points and walking the opposite direction to the bottom, which is very hard to hunt, and then coming back to the food source, what you want to do is build a pattern, water, food, everything they need in the same path, so that you can get them to do a pattern instead of guessing what they're going to be doing. Some days they're going to get up and go to water, but I used to think that every day when a buck left its core area, it was headed to water. That's not true. I don't know why it is, but it's not true, because I've watched them from those towers for too many years and understand that's not the facts. So we try to just deal with the facts, and again, if you can get them to do what you want, and they will if you give them what they need.
On this property were cooling ponds, so they were man-made. So they've been here 100 years, but even though they're on the south side, I wanted to have something more to the center of the property, and when the bucks are rutting, they hit that watering hole constantly, and that's where I get my good pictures. And then that gives me an idea. When the buck I shot last year, he was hitting it early in the morning around 6 o'clock, and he was heading north. And I told Jim that night, I said, if I get up on that north ridge where we have the stand set, there's a good chance if I get out here early enough and the wind's right, that he'll come through. I had a west wind, he came through, circled around, and then I ended up getting my shot.
I went to a property in Nebraska 6 years ago, and he had this cable stretched from one tree to the next and had these ropes hanging down off of it, right? And there was one of those ropes had a licking or a scrape underneath it that they was using as a licking branch. And I just kind of laughed. And, you know, when go to a property, I'm working as hard as I possibly can, and there's 2 to 3 hours in putting this cable up and all these ropes. I'm thinking, yeah, right, what benefits that? Well, 3 years later, when I go back to the same property, I've worked for that guy maybe 30 days over the last few years. Every one of those licking branches is being used for a scrape. So what I know now is when you read a book that says, hey, there's this big breeding scrape on the ground, the whole deal is that limb has been there for multiple years. And so more and more deer know where that's at to leave their scent there. And so what you want to do is, in nature, what happens is these bottom limbs die out because they're not getting any sun. And that's what happens to these trees. That's the reason it's got all these little knots up and down it, is that tree didn't get any sun down to the bottom limbs. They just keep dropping off, self-pruning. But if you want a licking branch to stay in the same spot, what you want to do is cut the tree off above that licking branch, and then all the energy goes into that limb. And so that limb's going to stay alive. And so the first year, the scrape typically will be about 18 inches, and the next year is a little bigger, and then by the third year, it's going to be the size of a car hood typically. And so we don't hunt this staging area here. If you look around in here, there's a lot of chicory in here, using Redmond Mineral in here. And that Redmond Mineral, we're spreading it out just like a fertilizer. $10 a bag, the #1 deer attractant period that I know of. And what it has is 60 different water-soluble nutrients in it, so the plants absorb those nutrients and then the deer get that into their body. You can talk all you want about minerals. There's no scientific proof that any mineral out there grows horns. If you've ever heard of a product called antler dirt, it's chicken manure mulch, and they put the Redmond Mineral in that to help the bacteria and the fungus kick off in there and produce more plants. So it's redmondnatural.com. It's the same exact thing as Trophy Rock. Trophy Rock's going to be $15 for a 12-pound block. This is $10 for a 50-pound bag. And again, I spread it out just like a fertilizer. Your plants are going to green up, and you're going to pull deer unbelievable within a couple of days. But again, the key is water-soluble nutrients in that, because it was in the ocean water at one time. I talked to the guy on their website, one of their area reps. He claims that the stuff in that bag is the same exact concentration as
what's in our blood. So whatever that means, it means that it is, you know, the same level, so you're not overdoing any certain level. Now don't get me wrong, if we come out here when the plants are all wet in August and we put sea salt on top of wet plants in August, we're going to burn them. So they recommend 200 pounds an acre the first year and 100 pounds an acre as a maintenance after that. But to get back to this staging area, we want to improve this soil. We're 75 yards or so back away from the food source. So in the future, this is where I recommend that you hunt. And I feel like I should probably cut more trees. Andy's allowed me to start cutting more and more trees as we've went along here. In the beginning, 4 years ago, it was being real selective. We took a lot of stuff out of here. If you can see how thick that is over there, that's exactly what this was. And over time, we're going to take more out. I don't bring equipment in to do it. What I want to do is most up by hand. Then these things will sprout up, and the deer will eat on them for a bit, and then I'll cut them down lower the next year so I can run my DR mower around in here. But the more licking branches you have in this spot, the more attraction you'll get here over time. And those bucks that I'm killing from the 9th to the 12th that are traveling these big, huge circles, what they are doing is they're coming through all the converging hubs. So they travel these big, huge circles, 3 to 4 miles. No matter where they're at, they're coming to this spot if I have enough licking branches here and enough doe activity. So they're going to come through here. It might be noon, it might be 2 o'clock, it might be 5 o'clock in the evening. It doesn't matter if John bumped him over there or whoever bumped him over here, he's still going to come through this spot. So, any questions about that?
Do you put licking branches on next to food sources?
I think you can put licking branches on food sources, but I don't know exactly why you'd want to, in my opinion. And the reason is, I don't want to put one licking branch out per acre and just randomly go across the property.
One every 30, 40 yards?
I want to put them on my travel corridor in my staging area where they're going to benefit me for travel. You know, I don't want, well, and that's just my opinion, that's how I hunt. That property that I learned a lot of my stuff on in Iowa, 574 acres. We put out 4 food plots the first year, drilled water wells and put underground irrigation and had these 4 3-acre plots. We thought, man, this is awesome. Next year we put 4 more plots out. The next year we put 4 more plots out. Before long we got 17 food plots out. You're flipping a coin, where are you going to go hunt at? You know, where's he at, you know? So what I'm getting at is, I like to put everything in a pattern. So I'm going to put the licking branches in the staging area and the trail from here to the food source and from here to the bedding area so I can build a pattern. I don't want that buck coming over here to a licking branch over and get him off of the pattern just so he has to come back to the pattern.
Can you explain what the purpose of the staging area socially and why it's...
The staging area is that he comes out of his bed. This is the first place, one, he's going to get plenty of food, and it's in cover, and he feels safe here. And so I recommend, guys, you know, you put your food plot in off the bat, yeah, kill them on your food plot. It's a trap. Kill them on your food plot for the first couple of years, then they figure that out. So this is your next trap. You come in here and set up your stand 75 yards back because you put enough pressure on them up there that they're hanging up back here.
You said you planted something here?
Yes, you can see it here. This is chicory right here.
Did you just
I broadcast it on top of the ground.
Didn't work the ground or nothing?
I never worked the ground because in the timber, when you bring a dozer in here, I've seen it over and over and over. You bring a dozer in here and the first thing you're going to want to do is push these trees out, and the whole root wad's going to go with it with all the good soil, and you're going to push that over to the side, and then you're going to spin around in here about 10 or 15 times doing the other trees, and then you're going to grow rye grain for 3 years because you're not going to get anything else to grow. That's what I've personally seen.
August, September, when you do that?
I say anytime you got time to do it. We put in a food staging area down over the hill, and we'll walk through that in a little bit. We done that in January this year. You know, and the stumps in it are taller. I believe there was snow on when we done that one. And if you was here last year, we done one on the southwest corner of the property, and we left the stumps high there too. Again, the deer browse on it, and then the next year I cut it off down lower, and then I can run my DR mower over top of it. Again, these are the methods that I've seen that have been very easy and beneficial and cheap, and it takes a little while to drag all the brush out of here, don't get me wrong.
That stuff you put down, that red stuff, you use that instead of lime too? You put lime down too?
I think lime's important, especially in timber if you got very many oak trees or acidic leaves, and you know, you might even burn it to get rid of that stuff, you know. I've done some burning in the past. James Crow claims that you should burn all the way through your timber every 3 years, but when you start getting all these hinge cut trees down and got a lot of dead debris, I'd hate to see burn up all my hinge cut and all my cover, you know. But again, there's a whole lot of different methods out there, and every one of the different habitat projects, I'm trying to gear specifically for deer instead of a lot of other animals, even though they do benefit from it. So right now I would cut this area right here harder. In my opinion, I take the hickories out of it and maybe leave some of the black cherries in here. But every area, some places the black cherry is going to be money trees and some they're not. They get a lot of knots in them a lot of times. So I'm not a professional forester.
This was a carpet of chicory last year. And in the southwest corner, it was the same way. I mean, it was amazing, and it was just all. I mean, what Jim's basically gone in and done in these is he'll take a leaf blower, blow all the leaves out, and then just broadcast it on top of the soil, and it takes off like that.
So we do the lime, the fertilizer, the mineral, the seed. Right now I'm using the 6-point chicory is the variety. I'm using white Dutch clover, which is very invasive and will grow almost anywhere, and I'm using grazing alfalfa. And so I run that around. Actually, I'm doing it in my bedding areas now and in my staging areas.
What was the clover, the white clover again?
White Dutch, certified white Dutch clover, stuff that grows in your yard that you can't get rid of. And it's Roundup ready, actually. You can kill it, it'll turn brown, and it'll come right back most of the time. It'll flood out. It could be standing underwater for a month, and it'll come back.
Ed Spinazzola writes a lot. He wrote a book about food plots and talked a lot about using Roundup on clover and reducing the amount of Roundup, but getting a kill on the weeds, and even though it would damage the clover, it would come back pretty hard.
The white Dutch is the hardest out of all of them. It's only going to get 6 inches tall. It's not tonnage, but it's very attractive, and it's going to grow. I'm going to talk real quick before we get into bedding areas over here that we've built. I've done 24 beds, put 24 Plot Watcher Pros on them, took a picture every 15 seconds for 6 weeks. So it was 16 to 1800 photos a day, and it was 160,000 pictures per camera. So it was over 3 million photos that I got on these beds. And what I know for a fact is the stories that you hear about deer being nocturnal really aren't true. Somebody speculated and started writing about that, and another writer thought it sounded real good, and they really hadn't ever watched deer in beds much, so it started getting real popular. And if a person can't see the buck now, all of a sudden he's nocturnal, you know. But the facts of the matter is, I've never got a picture of a buck in a bed before 8:30 in the morning, because they're laying down chewing their cud up close to a food source. That's what bucks do right at daylight, especially mature ones. The ones that are running around, the year-old buck, the 2-year-old buck that still acts exactly like the doe, because that's where he has spent all his life hanging out with the does. That's not really the case. You'll see them at daylight, but your mature ones, they're laying down chewing their cuds, reason we're not seeing them. And then they're up moving. When everybody's killing them, it's 9:15 to 10:30, and then 11:30 to 12:30. And so if you look at that, tells you the average amount of time that a buck's in a bed is 1 hour and 20 minutes, and that's that gap, I feel like, between those two time periods there that you're not seeing many. And so again, the average time they're in a bed is 1 hour and 20 minutes. The longest I've ever seen one in a bed is 4.5 hours. I've seen them laying in the bed up until dark, but I've never seen them in the bed before 8:30 in the morning. So it tells you can hunt a bedding area, in my opinion, if you get in there early, but there's a good chance you might bump him on your way out, because here they got several beds. And that's another thing, if you see several beds in a spot on the end of a ridge, it's typically a bachelor group, or each deer, each buck's going to have 3 to 4 beds of his own. And I had a picture or a bed situation where I had 3 different bucks living in the same bed. And you think, well, how could that be? Well, the year-old buck is laying there, and the mature buck walks up and stands over top of him, and the little one gets up and walks away, and the big one lays down. Is how that is. You know, that's just how they are. It's just like walking into the living room and sitting down on the couch, and the kids are there. They're going to get out of the way typically. You know, it's just how it works. But there's no mystery in any of that. It's just people just don't know exactly how it goes because they haven't been able to sit there and watch them. So, any questions on that?
When you come in here and clear this out, would you come through and spray this with Roundup or anything?
It all depends on what's in here. Did you guys hear that? Do you spray this with Roundup before I do anything else? There's cool season plants and there's warm season plants. If I'm going to put this in here in the spring and I come through and kill it, my method for using Roundup is I mix it 3 times stronger than recommended on the bottle. I come in and spray it. As soon as it dries, then I spread my seed, my fertilizer, and mow it. So I'll give it 45 minutes to an hour typically. The longest, I'm going to give it 4 hours to have contact before I come in and use my mower on it. I don't have time. But if you would have seen this during the season, you would have realized that the chicory comes in great in that scenario. But so if we put it in, we kill it in the spring, we're still going to have our warm season plants come up later in the year when the soil temperature gets about 70 degrees. So you're still going to have a lot of weeds in here is what I'm getting at. So you always want to use some type of a cover crop if you can. Oats in the spring, rye grain in the fall. So to help compete against it. And James Crow, when I went down with that class, I told you about the different food plots we had out there. We were mowing them 3 times a year and using different Whitetail Institute sleigh and arrest to keep all the weeds out of them. So James Crow said, this right here is arrowleaf clover, and this right here is chicory, and all this stuff in between here is deer food. And you guys call it weeds, but it's broadleaf plants. Again, #1 deer grower in the world. Killed 2,800 deer with 1 gun. So here I took a picture of it, you know. I was like, our stuff's so much better than yours, you know. Well, lo and behold, it's not true. It is deer food, you know. So in that class, I heard a bunch of stuff that took me 5 years to realize, hey, he was exactly right. He wasn't lying to us about anything. So you guys are going to hear stuff today, and you're going to be like, ha, 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 ha. That's not right. That's not the way I hunt, right? That can't be right. Well, believe it or not, we're not lying to you about anything, and we're not hiding anything. It's not costing anybody to be here. So if you don't think it's true today, I bet you if you study it long enough, you might realize it actually is. So.
Unbelievable, dude. That's unbelievable.
This is a bedding area right over here. So we've got this big ridge goes down through here, but we've got little fingers that come off. And we've got little points. Jim did some work here in January, and when I was in here last weekend, that bed there's a bed right there. So I want you guys to kind of mill around and go through these areas. Feel free, but they've been bedding down in this already. When it was in the snow, I could see nice pockets where it had melted, and we've had deer in here already. Now you'll see the stump sprouts on those trees there. Jim cut this last year. The buck I shot 2 years ago, I shot to stand about 100 yards that way. My access point, I've got a gate on the northeast corner of the property, so this is great access. I've got neighbors over here, houses. The deer don't care. They're used to those people there. They can be out running leaf blowers and lawnmowers and anything else, and the deer flat out don't care. They're in the woods, they've got enough of a stem count in here, they're not worried about it. All right, so the biggest buck I shot last year, or the one I shot last year, the iron buck, I'm going to tell you this story. I shot him out of the tree. It's right, it's maybe a little bit further. It's right over there. That buck came into this area. He actually came from my left, which would be the west side. And when he came into the area, he was bird dogging a doe. You smell it. He was like a hound dog. His head was down, and about 40 yards, I could not get a shot. He went towards my truck. My truck was right over there and disappeared. It wasn't 10 minutes later, after I started to calm down, a doe came from the north and headed south, and she was hot. He came running from that area, picked up her scent, came running back, followed the trail that I raked and walked in on, ran that trail in, followed it all the way around at the base of my tree, and that's when I shot him at 17 yards. Again, I didn't shoot him that well, but that's where I shot him. So it worked out. And they run this ridge like crazy. This ridge is a hot spot on this property. And there's some other hot spots, but this is the area that I love to hunt the most. And I've killed the last 2 years off of this ridge. This is where I want to be, and this is where I love to sit, is in this part of the woods.
And you hunt right in this area.
Yes. I hunted out, I killed him out of that tree right over there. All right, so yeah, we've got buck beds here in this area, but you're gonna see Jim's cut some more screening cover over here to protect that stand. That was one of the reasons he did that, was to help protect the stand. But this is more screening cover here, so when I come in, if I've got deer bedded down here, I can circle around and I can get into that stand and not bother them. In fact, the morning when I shot that deer, there was a small 1.5-year-old buck that was bedded down not 50 yards from my stand, and once it got light, I turned around and there he was. So I don't know how I got in, or unless he just walked up and I didn't hear him and he bedded down, but I was surprised when I turned around and there he was. And that was the coldest day too. November 13th was the cold day. Remember that one, Jim?
Yeah.
That was a cold morning.
Staying out more than myself.
Yeah. All right, any questions?
So when you come into a place like this and you start doing these hinge cuts, I mean, what's the rhyme or reason as far as how you start that?
Jim, where you at? I need you to talk to this one. I will tell you, I am not. Yeah, Jim, this stuff happens in his mind, and if you watch him do it, he'll look at a tree and he'll cut it, and you'll think, okay, why is he cutting that one? And he'll kind of piece it together. He'll fall some trees together, and then he'll make a cut, and all 5 of them will fall at one time into a pile. And I just stand there and shake my head. How did he do it? But that's what he does all the time. He does it every day. He's done it his whole career. So he's good at it. Now I come in, and when I do it, I may take a handsaw, and it'll take me and my kids 2 hours to build a bed that we want. But go ahead.
So I'm cutting 50 to 70,000 trees a year now is what I'm figuring, right? And so I'm cutting 600 to 800 a day. And so what I'm getting at on that is, what I've learned from what I'm doing is, again, it's the same deal as over by the food plot. We want to have a wall to the deer feel comfortable behind that. And so that's what this is right here in front of you. And then the beds are on the other side of that on the end of a point. And so bucks want a bed on the end of a point out here at the end every time for some reason. You don't read about it. I don't know why you don't read about it. But if you come out in the snow, that's where they're at. And so behind this wall of vegetation is where the beds are, and everybody can meander back through here. But again, out through here, again, what we're wanting to do is stack screening cover. So we got thick here behind you. We got this trail. And over time, we're going to get more sunlight in here. I'm going to do the white Dutch clover and chicory down this. And then another thick wall. And then we got the bedding area. So the scenario that I would like to do is a feathered edge all the way around the bedding area, if I had the trees in the situation to do it. And then small little piles of cover or side cover, or at least put logs for the deer to lay down against inside the bedding area, and have that almost down to dirt in there, to where I get a lot of different types of plants to come up, to where I got my daytime food so they can get up and mill around in there and have something to eat on. And so again, I don't want to choke up the inside of my bedding area so much like I used to, because then they don't have access around in there, and then you're in there more often cutting. So if you can drop a lot of those bigger trees out to get my sunlight in there, but then also have it thick like this to where they feel safe in there is the scenario.
So that, what he just said, that last section is kind of a new process for you. Is that a fair statement?
That's fact. The last couple of years, I've been seeing it more and more, that when we get it so thick that they can't get in velvet, the whole bachelor group don't want to be in there, basically. And that's what I'm trying to build. Again, I'm in these areas, I'm starting to do the fertilizer, mineral, and all the different seeds that I talked about. I'm going to get about 30 to 40% of my seed to do any good in there. But again, I got instantaneous diversity when I do that, higher quality, so that they can mix that with their browse. You know, professional deer guys that are growing deer in pens, they don't have an alfalfa field in their pen. They don't have a clover plot in their pen, because that's not what deer do, right? They can't handle that high quality protein all the time. That's the reason they don't grow those plants in there. They just let it go naturally. But what we're trying to do is enhance this. And so I cut all the vines out of the trees, so my oak trees that are left in there are going to produce more acorns. And doing a timber stand improvement to where we're going to have better timber one of these days. So we're trying to do every aspect of it. I mean, do I think this bedding area would have been better if I could have cut all these trees down? Yes. Do I think that it's absolutely necessary to do it? No. But I might in 5 years from now. Any questions about that?
When you make a bed area, you make like a place for them to come in and a place for them to come out.
Exactly. If you try, so my beds, most of them you're going to see there's a log. I want the log to be 16 inches around. I don't know if you guys have seen the life-size deer that I have that I take around to shows. They're both 300-pound deer. One's 310 pounds, the other one was 280, right? It's the biggest forms that you can possibly buy. What I'm saying is it takes a 5-foot-long bed for that deer to lay down comfortably. So whenever I find my spot, and location is the key, that's the reason we're on a point, you put the log down. You don't want to put it back in a cave to where they can't get out to both ends. They want to walk in from the end, lay right down beside the log, and then leave straight out the other end. And that's 3 times more effective than having a hut all the way around closed off on the end and trying to shove the log back in it for them to lay on. And it doesn't sound like it's that big a deal, but it's that big of a deal actually. And so overhead canopy, a guy just mentioned about hedge trees. Deer want overhead canopy for sure, but if they can't get in and out on the ends, they're not going to bed under it. So in nature, there's a lot of different types of trees that are going to give you that. Hawthorn trees, he's got a few apple trees on this property, hedge apple trees, dogwood, bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, willow trees will do it. Or any tree that a vine grows up over top of it and bends that tree over, and that's what our vine honeysuckle is going to do for us in the future. And our grapevines that we've cut out of all the trees are going to do is canopy up over top of these small trees.
Hedge apple.
Hedge apple is a great bedding tree, and I cut them. They're hard. It's a trash tree, and I cut them high, and it's going to lay there for 10 years without falling down. And so the reason I even cut them is so I can get some sunlight in there, so they got some type of daytime food. I think that's the biggest thing between mature bucks and younger deer is having that daytime food to be at its prime for them.
What was your question, Terry?
Yeah, so you got this before Jim did this, you know?
Yes.
So pretty dramatic difference in
Oh yeah.
number of deer?
I would see, well, I'm seeing more controlled movement through here now. Whereas beforehand, I may stick, I would stick, say, in that oak tree there, and I would see deer move through here, but I couldn't get them. This is pinching them down, and this gives them the natural, they like this. This gives them a comfort level. They can move through it, they can move in and out. The does will hang out, they'll be social in here. It's a little bit better, where I was 13. I never killed a mature buck until 2011. Now I tried a lot. I went for a decade and didn't shoot a wall hanger. And I mean, it was frustrating. My wife will tell you, in 08, 09, I was so discouraged. I would hunt, and I hunted until the very last hour of the late bow season, and would not kill anything. And it was very frustrating. So when I met Jim, that was one of the reasons why I hired him and brought him onto the property. And we spent the first half day just talking and walking, like what we're doing today. And that's what started to build my confidence. I started to understand some things, started to understand deer movement a little bit better, understand how the land was impacting how the deer moved. And it's just been, this is kind of a laboratory for me. And I think I've given Jim the freedom to come out here and test things. So what he just talked about was stacking and doing things. Yesterday he built an area on a west point that we have over here that you guys are going to get to see. It's the first time he's done it on the property where he's doing that. And so you guys are going to get to see this firsthand. He's not done it on my property. It's brand new.
So we concentrate trails, all the deer trails, into a couple by doing this also. And if you look, as you walk along these trails, you look at all the stuff that's regrowing, and you see the browse damage on it, and that's a big thing that I pay attention to when I'm walking through a property. But then also you're going to recognize all the rubs that you're starting to see. This trail's been in 2 years here. And so you'll start seeing all these rubs, and over time you'll see more and more rubs along them, right? And more licking branches naturally occurring, and it's better. I'll take a chainsaw, especially if I got a lot of cedar trees, I'll knock all the bottom limbs off and scar that tree up, and 30% of those will get used the first year as a rub tree.
No kidding. So Jim, What did you say about add minerals and seed, and you're only getting 30%? You're actually seeding the buck areas, the bedding areas?
I'm seeding the bedding areas and going through there with a leaf blower and running my DR mower in there, because anything that I cut off with my DR mower is going to sprout back and they're going to want to eat on it.
So what are you seeding with?
White Dutch, certified white Dutch clover, 6-point chicory is a variety, and grazing alfalfa.
Okay, so really the same as you were at stationary.
Exactly. That's the stuff that I'm seeing is growing the best in a shady, in rough conditions.
Yeah.
So grazing alfalfa is not, a lot of it's not going to, but again, I just want a high protein, high quality, that's going to produce as much food as I can get.
So Terry, to that point, one of the things that I shifted my thought process from was I felt like my food plots had to be the end-all be-all for deer to come to, and then I had to have the perfect food plot. One of the things that he's helped me understand is that we need to have food throughout the whole property for him like that. So that's why that trail you guys came down last year, and you can go online, I've got pictures online, that was a carpet of chicory all the way down through there and all the way up the other side.
And so you think, well, I'm putting food everywhere, but we're doing it and then we're pinching the trails down, and so we're creating big circle patterns for the bucks to travel on, and that's what they want to do. Most of the trails that guys are hunting are doe trails, getting up from their bed, going out to food, and then they turn around and come back down that same trail. So you got 3, 4, 5 deer using this same trail every day, walking back and forth on it. And that's the big heavy deer trail that guys are trying to hunt for bucks. The bucks are actually crossing most of those trails on your buck sneak trail. They don't need to walk down that trail because they're smelling everything that they need in the first 50, 75 yards. That's the reason a lot of times they walk in behind you in the stand, or they're in a spot that you don't think they should be, is because they're not walking the doe trails like everybody believes they are, right? They're getting that information, then they're going to the next deer trail and getting that information, then going to the next deer trail and getting that information.
This is where he was at. Basic area.
Yeah,
That's where St. Vincent goes out. Probably over the shack. Well, actually, I take it back. The shack wasn't even there.
Yeah, I've seen. A lot of guys are really liking it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm real pleased. In fact, I haven't gotten any. Digging holes.
Yeah, this is what.
If you're not wearing a harness, please talk to me one-on-one so that I can get you to buy into the religion about fall protection. It takes one fall to mess up your life or kill you, and your family and your friends doesn't deserve that. So that's my little a lot of comments about the height of this stand. This is the highest stand that I have. The reason I put it so high was because it kind of rises up through here, and I wanted to be out of view of the deer as they were passing through.
There's a lot of different methods to hinge cut a tree. You see in my videos, we throw a hook up in it and pull the tree over to get exactly where I want it, or use a pole. There's a lot of different methods on it. But what I'm doing now is using other trees to knock the trees over. So I will cut them 2/3 of the way through, and then I'll back up and take another tree as a push tree and knock them all over. One, the foresters don't want every hinge cut tree to stay alive. Two, what I want to do is get screening cover in their face and thick, but then I want to have open access, so I don't want every hinge cut tree to stay alive. And then I can cut 3 times more a day if I'm running through and doing the method that I'm talking about doing. So if you want a specific tree to stay alive, it's best to cut it a little over halfway through, then take the tip of the saw and cut the heartwood out of it, and then use something to pull it over to keep it alive. but you'll see a lot of these are just barely attached, and they're going to live for a while. But then also, we're wanting to cut most every one of them at face height, so the deer can access up underneath it.
What about for screening cover? You want to cut lower, like for blocking?
If you're wanting to block, then you have a variety of heights, and you'll see some of the trees that I've cut this year down the trail here that are cut lower. And the reason I'm cutting them lower is they're leaning the opposite direction. And if I cut that tree low and I have it cut in a way I'm going to be able to lean it across another hinge cut tree, now I got a leverage point of 6 or 8 feet that I can push that tree over backwards to where I can keep my speed up when I'm cutting 600 trees a day.
Well, I noticed you had different heights.
Yeah, you can do some blocking. I used to believe that I could make a whole wall that would be 300 yards long of dropping trees and they couldn't go through it. Well, that's not true, right? They're going to go through it. They want to go through it. But you can concentrate a lot of trails. It's easier, you know, for the deer to walk around some of that. But the longer you try to make that wall of vegetation, the more likely they're going to find a way through it, where they even have to crawl some places.
First 2 years, I always knew this was here, and for some reason I neglected to tell him. And I told him one year, and he's like, "Man, I'm here for 2 years, and you didn't tell me about this big rub."
Jim, what was your thought on sanctuaries? Was the question.
Most of the time when I go to a person's property and they laid it out as in a generic rubber stamp version. They put the sanctuary in the center of the property, they put the food plots in a circle around that, and then they access on the property lines. And it all sounds great, but there's no terrain features in there in that sanctuary for them to want to bed on. It doesn't do you much good. So the first thing I do is I walk you, and a guy asked me on 7,000 acres, where do you start? I start on the terrain features. So we walk straight out to the property, walk straight to the end of the ridge, we start looking at the beds. And by me studying those beds there, how tight they are in cover, how open they are around, I get a pretty good idea how stressed out your animals are real quick, and then we copy that. So then what I do is I try to walk from there and determine which direction that deer wants to leave there for food, and I build a trap from there. I want to go 75 to 100 yards away from that bedding area and figure out a way to pinch the deer down in front of a tree stand in a spot that you can get in and out of without having to walk right by that bedding area. And over time, that bedding area gets better and better. So again, there's no secret to this. The bucks want to bed on the end of a point, and they do it every time, and it doesn't matter if that point is 3 foot higher than what's around it or 200 feet higher than what's around it. That's where they're going to be at. And so we go by those terrain features, and if you don't improve that bedding and you just keep trying to walk by there, they're going to be there anyways, and then that causes problems for you. So the first year I cut it hard, take my big trees down first, and then I take my smaller stuff and put on top of that, and I call it a rough cut, and then I let all that stuff settle in is what I've learned, and instruct the homeowner, or if he wants me to, I'll go ahead and make the beds then, but a lot of times that stuff will settle down, and then you have to come in there and correct it anyways. And so over time, you want the rest of the stuff to grow horizontal and only grow a few good timber trees. And so foresters are saying 50 to 60 trees per acre is what they want for growing timber. And so that's about what I want too. There's a few good timber trees, and again, get sunlight to the ground and keep everything else above their eyeballs, just like a 4th year clear cut or big tall grass or whatever you want to call it. But the safety is anything above their eyes, and then have it open enough that you can get sunlight to the ground in some spots and they can access around in there.
But do you think having a sanctuary and never going into it is a good idea?
Everybody comes up with this scenario, right? Oh, I got this sanctuary and all my monster bucks are in there. So that 574 acres that my buddy owned, we had 60 acres of sanctuary. He didn't ever go in there because he wanted to have in his mind, oh man, that's where they're all at, right? The other guy thinks, man, they're all on my neighbor's property. I don't have any bedded on my property. They're all bedded on the neighbor's, you know. Grass is always greener. If you don't go into a spot, you just got in your head, oh, he's got to be in there. That's not true, because successional growth keeps growing, and if the neighbor has their property timbered, there's a good chance that he's moved because he's still in that home range. Science has proved now that deer do not leave their home range. Rarely will a mature buck leave its home range. With all the collared studies on deer, that's what they know. So they're going to go back to the same core areas every day, and they just get better and better at what they do. And they might have a couple of those core areas, but they're not going to leave their home range very often. So unless somebody can show me proof, not just speculation, that they seen happen one time and then they labeled that information as facts, and that's what a lot of people do, and I did it in the past, where I'd sit in a 117-foot tower for days and days and days and see the deer walking into the wind. I think, well, man, that book was true. And then I see 10 of them doing the opposite, and I think, well, wait a second, you know. And so just because you see something one time or a couple of times doesn't mean it's facts on what deer do. So sanctuary, in my opinion, is a great thing, but like Dr. James Crow showed us, if you walk and talk on your way in there, they hear you coming, and they get up and they move out of your way, and then they realize, hey, I didn't get hurt, and they come back to it.
Well, the first day I had Jim out at the property, he's talking like this, and I'm like, man, why are you talking so loud? We're standing right here. I can hear you. You know, he's like he's screaming. He says, I want the deer to hear me. So I said, okay. He says, I want the deer to hear me, so they'll get up, they'll walk off quietly. We'll come in through, do what we need to do. They're going to circle right back and go back to where they're at.
So I got guys that want me to whisper when I'm on their property. In the summertime, we're walking. What are we doing? We don't want to scare the deer off the property. You know, the deer know we're here, guys. I hate to tell you, I mean, they're that good at what they do. So we can try to sneak around if we want, like the Elmer Fudd look, you know, but the whole, its body language too is a very important thing to animals, you know. If you take a gun and you walk in by your dog, most dogs recognize what a gun is, whether they've been shot at or not, are going to cringe down by it. And animals, all animals understand the same thing. So what I've learned is give them what they want. The more you give them what they want, the more likely you're going to have them there. My mom can't keep the deer out of her garden hardly because it's fertilized plants, it's a variety of plants in there, and they're going to come in there. So we put blood meal in there, we put hair in there, it works for a period of time. I lived down in Florida, they had a big air cannon on this vegetable farm next to us. That air cannon would rattle the windows of the house when it would go off, right? It'd make you jump. And it'd work great for about 3 weeks or a month. And then after that, air cannon goes off, the deer are still standing in the beans or whatever, right? So they get used to anything you do. That's the reason that you need to move your tree stand every couple of years. That's the reason you need to hunt things differently, because they learn and they remember it. And if you don't move your tree stand 20, 30 yards, you know, I go to people's property all the time. I've been hunting this tree for 12 years, 14 years, whatever. 8 years ago, I done good. Well, how many of you killed in the last 8 years? Well, I really haven't done much good, but I'm still hunting here. Okay, well, great. You know, let's try to, and that's the reason I work so hard when I go to a place, because I have to build something to make guys our age realize that they need to hunt differently. Unless you give a guy a whole lot of confidence to try to hunt differently, he's not going to do it. He's going to go right back to what he's originally done his entire life because it worked for him 10 years ago, and he's going to stick to it. But there's a lot of different methods, and all, again, we're trying to do is connect the dots for people out here so that you can move farther along in your knowledge. So we try to keep it simple. Give them what they want and figure out a little bit, enough of a pattern to kill them. You know, big rubs are important, there's no doubt about it, and deer will come through. There'll be a little deer on this, there'll be big deer on it, and what you see in all the pictures people post on Facebook, they always want to get up here and put their hands all over it and take the picture beside it, you know, to show you how big it is. But on cedar trees, what I typically do now, before it gets this far along, I cut the top out of the cedar tree. So I got sunlight down here, and it keeps it healthier. But I rub on these trees with a chainsaw, make it shine, and 30% of those are going to work the first year. I take the bottom limbs off of them so they can get in there and hit it. But you know, once a mature buck knows where a spot is, they want to keep coming through those spots. So any of this stuff that you can connect together with the next one with habitat, the better off you're going to be for daylight activities.
So that's why we have this up here, right? And that's why we've done this, the new staging area down here.
And all the way along your trail, you can plant a cedar tree every 30 yards, and they're real easy to plant, and deer aren't going to eat them much, and you're going to have rub trees all the way down it, right? Have a lot of these here, so we got the limbs down low. It's getting plenty of sunlight. They're going to keep growing like that, so where we have licking branches in the future. We haven't seeded anything in here yet. We cut this couple of months back. But what the main attraction here is we got a big chunk of timber this direction, right? And so what we want to do is be able to pull those deer from that direction into the property. And this would be the first place that we can hunt them. And we're going to pinch the stuff down by making these walls of vegetation and concentrating these trails. You know, the spot I would hunt this, if it was me, would be that beech tree up there with all the limbs in it, instead of being down here in this little bottom. But again, I want to be on a little higher ground, so I have a little better wind direction, don't have as much of a swirl situation. With the water here, I'd have to sit in here a couple of times to know what the wind's going to do on a regular basis in here. Thermals, I don't know how many people have studied wind direction over the years, but thermals are crazy, right? I mean, you'd be sitting here, it's all perfect, and then boom, sun sets, you got this cool water over here, and you got the food plots up on top, green as can be, and lifting air and change the wind direction on you. So I hate to hunt in the bottom, but my scent control is to where it needs to be now that I can. So we're leaving some small saplings in here to rub on. A lot of the stumps that are in here are going to regrow real fast because it's got a real big root system on them, so they will be rub trees in the future. Again, just a way to concentrate the bucks as they're coming into the property out of the big timber.
And you're going to plant.
Yeah, we're going to plant these staging areas. What I really want is pure chicory, but it might take a couple of years to get it thick enough to have enough food here. Does don't hammer chicory near as much in October as bucks do. Bucks will hammer this chicory in October, the third week, the end of the month, for some reason, and I don't know why it is, but they do.
So you still do the blend though to get it going?
I do, and what it is, you got enough shade in here, no matter what you do, it's not going to be a perfect food plot. And it doesn't need to be a perfect food plot because we got these stumps, we got a variety of plants that are going to come up in here naturally, and the deer are going to be eating in here as long as we keep pounding this with fertilizer and our Redmond Mineral all through here and improve these soils in here. So, again, there's no secret to this except for we're putting an open spot in the timber in a place that we can get in from the edge of the property easy without having to be on top of the buck beds or on top of the deer bedded. In a scenario like this, how important is soil test? I'd say a soil test is always a good thing because on a lot of properties like this property, there's probably 5 different soils on this property. And a lot of properties might have a dozen different soils. But there was already good vegetation growing here, so I know this soil has to be decent, right? If I go to a spot where there's nothing growing, and I look and it's fescue or brome grass, or depending on where I'm at, and the vegetation looks poor, there's probably a reason it's poor. And that's where most people want to go in and put a food plot because it's easy, We cut a lot of trees out of this little spot here. I mean, it probably took us an hour and a half to do this, or 2 hours maybe.
It's 3 of us.
And some of these, I'd just soon all these poplars were gone out of here. I don't have much use for a poplar tree. It's not a stand tree, but again, they grow fast and they could be a timber tree in the future. Is the reason I didn't cut them. This point over here on his property, we haven't done any cutting on it, but you can see the shape of that point, and it's a good example. Where that buck wants to bed is out here where that gnarly tree is there on the end, right before that point drops off. That's where they always want to bed at naturally. So it comes out flat, and as soon as it starts to drop hard, that's where they want to be at. And so in the future, there's more big trees in there than any place on his property because when they timbered this, they didn't take them out. And so I just haven't got to that spot yet. But I will. Your does are naturally going to pile in behind there. And that's the reason he wants to go up through there, cutting all those trails and past all those natural doe bed situations. And as many of those as you can get to come together, like one on this side and one on this side. And then we got our buck off the end of the point. We could have done a staging area here, but again, it's kind of a short distance to be able to get in here, so we haven't decided to do a staging area in here.
So explain what that buck does on those sneak trails, what he's doing.
Again, all he's doing is wanting to stay back in the cover, and that's where you're going to find all your rubs at. So naturally, a buck sneak trail is almost always there, but we don't recognize it because it's a buck going one direction and making a circle. So it's one deer walking through the timber here and cutting all those doe trails and going past all the doe bedding. So you will find a rub line typically spread out through there. And if we enhance that to make him feel safer, we're going to have more edge for him to travel during daylight hours. And in this scenario, it's going to work out good because we just feathered edge the other side of this same ditch here that goes up through the center. He's got his box blind at the end, so in the future we can cut a shooting lane straight out between, right down the middle of that. So now we got 2 walls of vegetation, and we got 2 trail systems, and then a shooting lane to shoot the deer coming up through that center where they feel so comfortable at instead of out in the plots.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, that property up on the hill, that's mine.
But it's just something else I've been trying out just as an experiment. And we talked about how this was cut. And I said something about coming up over the hump.
Typically, is where your sneak trail is, and 20 yards usually is where the trees start growing straight again. And that's naturally where they're wanting to travel because it's usually.
A bed we just put together this year. So this was an old deadfall here. We dropped this big sycamore on top of it and created beds in this area, basically using that. And again, it's that big log that they like to bed down. You walk up here, you can see the beds here, and they've all got hair in them and a lot of prints in them. So take a look at them and walk, and we'll just kind of move on. So
We enter the property on the other side of these ponds, and these ponds have channelized the deer down to the bottom of this. And so they've made a travel corridor. Andy cut these trees and a couple of bigger hickory trees in here this year and this spring already. And these deer have already dove into this. So a lot of times I'll see maybe 3 weeks before they'll start using beds. It might take a little longer than that. But, and I don't know why that time frame is, but it is.
That's the price of lumber. That's hand cut.
So this, we didn't have a good spot really on the southwest side. So the idea behind this particular staging area, when we talked about what we wanted to do here, is there's a high power line right over here. My property line is just 50 yards that way, that runs this way. That's, if you look at an aerial map of this area, this part of the county, there's a lot of woods that moves through here, so it's a natural funnel travel area north and south. So the idea behind this this area here is to pull them off of that open area as they're moving north and south. We want it to be like an off-ramp for them.
This is on the edge of the property, is another benefit of this. So over time, this spot's going to get better and better as far as a converging hub where more trails come together. You can see the trail we walked in on was heavy, and so this is actually the first season that this first season you hunted it, wasn't it? And so by the third season that he hunts it, we're going to have more licking branches, cut more of this junk back away to where we got more sunlight in here to where we can get more tonnage growing here and just be more of an attraction. If you guys walk by this spot here, one other thing I want to say is I try all this different stuff. I do all these shows. I try all this different mineral, all this different feed products that everybody talks about. And so I found a food source at the show last year up here at Indy. And so it was supposed to be the premier feed, and I believed it, right? It had like 20-some different types of grain in it. And so if you look up here, there's sunflower seeds, there's oats, there's beans, there's all this different stuff that was put in this bag for $27, and I got it at a discount. So we put 4 bags of it out, and a lot of it's still laying here in the mud. How long has it been out? 2 months?
Something like that.
Month and a half or whatever. So just because we believe something works, I've tried all these different minerals. I spent all this big money on mineral blocks, $35 for this mineral block or whatever. all these scientists, all these doctors that are doing all this as far as special stuff. And what I see over and over is Redmond Mineral that we talked about earlier is the cheapest, most attractive thing going for them. So just because we think that that's what they want doesn't necessarily mean it. What we got coming to this one feed here was possums and raccoons, and the deer come up and smelling it and walking away from it, right? So now there's corn out here that's a third the price. But anyways, another thing is you'll see the soybeans laying here in the mud also, and believe it or not, Grant Wood said it about 6 years ago or 5 years ago when I went to his class, deer don't like soybeans, and if you take a bag of beans and put them out there, what you realize pretty quick is deer don't like soybeans, just like he said. And so I didn't believe that at the time, but now I understand it. They're after the shell on the outside of it, so they eat the bean along with that, but they want the hull of the bean or the bean leaf, not the bean itself. But anyways, look at that as you walk by.
Yeah, when Jim said, hey, let's try this out, I said, hey, it sounds great. We'll see. We'll put the cameras on it and see what happens. And so I pulled the cameras the first time, and he called me and said, how's that stuff working? I said, they won't touch it. He said, you're kidding me. I said, they're not touching it. I said, well, I'm going to put a bag of corn out. I said, you think they'll touch that? And he goes, I know they'll touch that, but I wanted to know if they were going to touch that other stuff. So I don't know if he gave feedback to the product developer.
Because I don't want any trouble in the industry, you know. So I don't really dog anybody's stuff, but when you can see that it doesn't work, Doc's Mineral out in Nebraska, I bought a whole pallet of that mineral and put it out everywhere because it's supposed to have molasses in it, and it's supposed to have the same vitamins as women use for osteoporosis when they get older, and it's real expensive because it's chelated minerals and all this and that. Sounds all great. Listen to them for hours, explain it to me. Well, they wouldn't eat it. So whether it was great or not, if you can't get them to consume it, and they all tell you, don't put anything else out that has salt in it because they'll go to it first. Well, that's what I did. I didn't put anything else out but that, just like what they say, and boom, you know. So anyways, be wary of
That last part you're saying that they said not to put salt.
Any other salt products out. That's all the mineral guys out right now. They're saying, hey, my mineral's better because I got 5% salt in my mineral because it's a filler and it's the cheapest thing they can put in there. And that's what they say that everybody else is doing. So mine has got the best minerals and the best digestive stuff to help the deer get everything out of their food. And that's what I hear from 20 different sources, right? So I bought all their stuff over the years and tried it all out that I could come up with. And I'm right back to the Redmond Mineral, which is a sea salt mineral. And you can buy a salt shaker off of Redmond for $4 for 4 ounces, or you can buy a 50-pound for our sale for our table, or you can buy a 50-pound bag for $9. You know? And the plants absorb it because it's water-soluble minerals. So when the plants absorb it and the deer eats the plants, just like the reason we're eating salad and fruits and vegetables, because the nutrition is in that. We can't get it out of a pill yet. So 55% of the nation's taking supplements. And when I was in environmental protection from Ball State, got my degree, I got out, and I was doing manholes in Indianapolis, doing water samples, and the multivitamins are laying all the way down the bottom of the sewer pipe, you know. And so what I'm saying to you is, back then, it might not be the same thing now, but back then, we weren't smart enough to get the nutrition out of the vitamins we were taking. So, again, that's just my personal experience. So my Redmond Mineral, I'm not building a mineral pit because I don't want the deer coming here and passing disease. I'm spreading my mineral all the way out across the soil so the plants can absorb it. But then deer are dirt eaters. That's what they do. So I had a 2-day-old fawn that I got off of Joe Meter as a domesticated deer and raised her in the house for 4 months. Well, they wouldn't use the bathroom in the house because you have to put a bottle in their mouth and wipe their butt to stimulate them to use the bathroom, just like the dog does when the pups are little and they consume all that stuff, and just the same thing the deer do when the deer are small. So every time I let that deer outside, the first thing she'd do is eat dirt. And domesticated deer growers know the same thing. They're dirt eaters. That's the reason they tell you to take the mineral and mix it into the soil and in the mineral pit. Is because they're going to eat the dirt. They don't even like the taste of the mineral. They're after the salt in it. And we're trying to force feed them a certain thing. And maybe science will come out one of these days and prove that it's actually the fact that it's helping. But there's no scientific proof anywhere that I've been able to come up with that makes a bit of difference. So I want to make the soil healthier, make the plants healthier, and it makes sense to me.
And you're staging areas like this in the woods, you said that you try to keep a chicory. Is that because of the residue base, or is that because of
Because that's what bucks want the third week of October is chicory when I'm hunting. That's what I go with chicory. And it's going to grow up this tall, and so it's going to get its own sunlight as opposed to my clover. If you look around in here, you're going to see clover on the ground here.
I was looking right.
And there's going to be a little clover, but a lot of this in here. And again, we're going to start getting our grasses in here because we put fertilizer on it. So anytime you put nitrogen on it, you're going to start getting grass. But like bluegrass, this real thin-bladed grass, they will eat that more than they will a lot of grasses. But we don't even want the grass in here, period. Or I don't.
You want a kind of a monoculture of chicory then?
I want a monoculture of chicory, but I always come in and do the rye grain in here so that I have something that's going to start growing low, and when I get the chicory ate down, I still got something to attract the deer. And it's also going to help me as a cover crop this spring because my cool season plants are going to explode in here because I got this soil is banked with old seed. And since I didn't bust it apart with a disc or anything, those seeds are still in there for a couple, 3 years. And so we need to keep out competing those or we're going to have this whole thing just broadleaf plants, which ain't the worst thing in the world, don't get me wrong, but the chicory's still a better food source.
How do you deal with the rye coming up in the spring?
Clethodim. I want to use clethodim to kill out my rye or on any of my plots. So every plot that we put out, I want to mow it the last time in August and broadcast winter wheat and rye grain, whether it's alfalfa, clover, chicory, whatever it is. I want to do that, mow that debris over top of it, and you're going to get about 50% of it to grow. Then in the spring, when you come in and it starts out competing the forbs that you, or the plants that you want in there, then you spray it with clethodim to kill all your grass again, like you need to do on a regular basis, because grass is invasive, and then you kill out the rye grain and the winter wheat at the same time. Now you got some organic matter. Rye grain's going to grow at a soil temperature of 34 degrees. It's going to grow better in the wintertime than anything that we've been able to come up with, except for this timber sedge that I was showing you guys earlier. It's all through the timber. So it's going to give you more food than anything else in here on cold months. And going to, again, help out-compete some of the broadleafs that we don't necessarily want coming in. And it's going to put a root system down 3 to 4 or 5 foot into the soil. And when that dies out, you're aerating your soil some. So there's a lot of benefits of it.
So I take it you're not getting any kickbacks from the mineral companies then?
I don't get kickbacks, or I'm not sponsored by anybody whatsoever because I want to buy everything, because when I go back to the show and the guy says, well, what do you think? Well, this product was great. Well, here, let me give you some more of it. And then we got a new product out, as a matter of fact, and you need to be pushing this product because now you owe me because I gave you this stuff for free, right? And the new product don't work maybe, you know what I'm saying? Absolutely. So I've been down all those roads. I was shooting the Matthews, and then I started doing some stuff, and PSE wanted to give me a bow, and man, it's the greatest bow going, blah, blah. Well, oh, great, you know, and then here it's not shooting as good as what I was, you know. Anybody gives you anything, you owe them.
It's a big industry.
And then if you don't promote their product, like I'm not on the minerals, then where are you? Because then they don't like you, right?
I guess I like you, all right.
Thanks. So you got a product?
Hey Jim, yeah. Explain real quick about what you did on the left and the right of it.
We're just wanting to funnel the deer down through here. So there's 4 or 5 trails coming off over here and several coming off over here. So you got to get rid of the debris somewhere, right? And so it's just easiest to channelize the deer, you know, getting that debris back, and then they're going to feel a little safer in here. I know that you need about a 30-yard circle is what you need to get sunlight and to make them feel comfortable. If you get too much debris straight up and down beside them, I feel like the mature deer feel like they're pinned in, and I don't think they like it as well. That's just what I've visually seen. But so if I don't know if you guys see, that's a tree stand tree back here. We're going to access down the property line to get into it. Our deer bedding's right up on top of this point here. You can see the trail coming down the hill. So over time, we're just going to keep knocking more stuff back, get more sunlight in here, more screening cover, and keep improving it over time.
Much of the view.
Right. Well, here's why I think they're using this through the winter, is this is on the back side of this hill, and I think when the snow was flying, they wanted this sheltered from the wind a little bit.
Top of that, and it won't break it off the stump.
So when you come into an area like this, you want to take your big trees down first, so they're going to stay attached to your hickory, your elm, your hackberry. They're going to stay attached, sycamore, they're going to stay attached to the stump. That's your framework, and then you drop your other stuff down on top of that for your screening cover. But this is my style of hunting, and so when I come in several years ago, I tried to get Andy to come and hunt in here, and what this basically is hunting right in the bedding area. So when I go from property to property to property, the guys got their stands in 2 locations. They either got their stand right in the bedding area and don't realize it's a bedding area, because that's where they see the rubs at. They don't recognize a deer bed, or they got their stand on the food plot, right? And so everybody goes like, man, I wouldn't hunt in a bedding area. Well, if you can get in here, your success rate skyrockets, right? Because you're in contact with the animal. Something's got to move. Either you got to move or the animal's got to move to get it in front of your equipment. So, again, most guys don't have the mature buck living on their property. He could be a quarter of a mile away, a half mile away when he's trying to access. So again, I'm going to hunt the best spots on the entire property from the 9th to the 12th of November. I'm going to have a rake or leaf blown trail to that spot. I'm going to round up that trail so I don't have vegetation growing up on it. I'm going to be 100% scent free. If you check out my video, you'll understand what it takes to be that way. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hunt all day. And so my success rate skyrockets. I'm not sitting back in the stands on the sidelines. I'm right in the middle of the action. And so that's how I like to hunt. But everybody wants to hunt differently. So if this isn't for you, you don't want to put a stand in this location. But again, he can see out into the food plot from here, so he can watch activity from a distance. And then what I've tried to do here this time is, like we had talked, I want a feathered edge basically all the way around this point. So I drop my vegetation down, which would be on this location right where the hill starts to drop. And then I want to put beds below that, so that vegetation that I'm dropping down is screening cover for behind them. And I wanted to open up the top, and I make piles of vegetation up on top. So one, I get rid of trees, so I'm not plugging up my whole entire top to where they can access around. I got sunlight in there, but I also give them cover to hide up against. So going out this point, what I've done right up here in front of us, I made a wall here to where the deer are going to feel safe, and then I went up another 50 yards or so and made another wall coming from the other side of the point. So now we're stacking vegetation out the point so that they can't see out this way to make them feel comfortable.
Is it a lateral wall or a perpendicular wall?
The walls going out the point that are coming across are perpendicular to the point, and the vegetation for the screening cover around the outside is going to go all the way around parallel with the point. And it's a very hard thing to do. Right? But that's the whole idea behind it. So most trees on a hillside you want to drop across or parallel with the point, because anything you drop down is almost worthless for cover or anything else. Because after you get off the military crest, in my opinion, that side hill is almost worthless except for food, right? Which we can get a lot of that up here anyways. So I don't want to spend all my time on a side hill where I'm in a low quality square footage area instead of in the highest quality square footage area, which is up here on top. So you can mill around all through here and then just ask questions, because I'm sure you'll have some more.
I'll lead you guys to that spot.
So all these trails, again, in the spring I put down a cover crop with the 3 plants that I already talked about, white Dutch clover, chicory, and alfalfa on these. I fertilize them and mineral the whole entire thing using the mineral like a fertilizer. And then in the fall I come back, do my rye grain winter wheat on the same trail, more fertilizer, and mow it. So in 2 to 3 years what we get is a really highly nutritious trail where every 2 to 3 steps what a deer naturally does is want to take a bite. And so we're just improving their travel corridor with vegetation, higher quality vegetation. In my opinion, that's where your swirling wind is. Your dominant wind comes across, your thermals come up, and it tumbles right there. So he can smell all the way around him. He can smell all this with the thermal coming up out of the bottom, and your dominant wind coming from the north. He can smell all this top and the bottom on the other side of that. Now, I also believe they like to see, but I don't want them to see. And what I've learned is, after being in all this switchgrass property, if you got warm season grass like this, he can't see in there and he's still living in there. He might see 5 yards, right? All he's doing is looking into grass. And that's the reason I believe now that you can get this as thick as you want and he's still going to be here. But
this is daytime food and your grass is not. And this is way cheaper because we're improving our timber at the same exact time. And a lot of states are going to pay you for a timber stand improvement. If you wouldn't have done anything, if we wouldn't have done any cutting, they would just kept competing against each other and dying out over time and dying out over time, and they would have grown a lot slower than what they will now. And we would have just had open timber, you know. So it had been a better property to hunt in the past until it got up past that successional stage. Again, it's 4 years on a clear cut, and that's what a lot of this probably was looking like, just a real thick clear cut. And then it gets up to 6 to 8 years old. You don't have anything else down underneath it, and so there's no reason for them to be there. Another trail that cuts around down lower here, again, so we make sure that they can access this real well.
So you put some seed through here?
I haven't yet.
So you will?
Yes. I should have done it yesterday, but it was pouring down rain when we was in here all day yesterday. And so I cut for about 8 hours in the rain and just didn't want to walk all the way back to the truck and get the stuff and bring it back in here, you know. But I throw seed on the ground from the middle of December, frost seed from the middle of December all the way through. And the biggest problem with that is you get too many birds eating up that seed some, you know. But it's not going anywhere. I mean, that's what nature does anyway. So.
You hear about people fertilizing their big chinkapin trees?
I fertilized oak trees, and I just haven't noticed that it's done me much good. But what I talked to was a guy that was a forester, and he was dealing with the fruit trees. And he said if you put too much nitrogen on a fruit tree, it will quit producing, because it all goes into foliage instead of fruit production. So it's your phosphorus and your potassium that produces the bloom or the fruit on a tree. And so there's a guy, Philip Vanderpool. He's killed some good bucks, at least one 200-inch deer off of oak trees. And so what he claims is he'll find what they call a pasture oak that's got a real big canopy on the top. And then he'll go fertilize the heck out of that tree and even lime the soil there, and so he can get that one really producing big acorns and a sweeter fruit on it. I haven't come up with that to where I've seen the benefit yet, but I'm not saying it isn't right, you know. But I think the tree has to be a real healthy tree. The foresters tell me between 25 and 50 years, the tree produces a lot more acorns than a tree that would be 60 to 100 years old. And I think that's because of stress and whatnot on the tree from like damage hollowing out or whatever. But again, I don't know a whole lot about it. But I think anything you fertilize is going to do better. But again, I don't think that you want to put too much nitrogen. The lady was talking about putting chicken manure on apple trees and how they were producing, and then she started fertilizing with this chicken manure and they quit producing anything. And he says just too much nitrogen is what the problem is. The tree's growing fast, but it's not producing anything.
So if you put fertilizer on the tree, wouldn't it be a year or two before you see the benefits?
I don't disagree, but there's different types of lime. If you do the pulverized lime, ag lime's going to take you 6 months. Your pulverized, your dust, it's going to be more like about 6 weeks. So you can get that a lot faster, and I use a lot of liquid fertilizer to where I get instantaneous. I'll come through here and round up this, but I'll put Miracle-Gro 10 times stronger than the recommended amount, and I'll spray that at the same time that I do my Roundup. So anything that my Roundup doesn't kill, I put a coat of fertilizer on it. And you can do the same thing when you spray for your grass in here. You can kill your grass and fertilize with the liquid fertilizer at the same exact time. And I've messed around with liquid lime, and I haven't come up with the answer on it because it didn't seem to do what everybody says that the liquid lime is supposed to do. I've seen a new product out a couple of weeks ago, and I might try it this coming year. But you know, everything sounds great when somebody's selling it to you, but when you get out and you try to use it and see the results off of it and can prove that it's doing something, a lot of times it's a lot different than what they're saying it is. You know.
Hey Jim, you said so a lot of these when you're cutting up here, it's creating an overhead canopy. When you're coming down in here, it's more just creating like blocking stuff off it or funneling.
Or the reason I'm doing it is so I can get it to go that direction, because it's leaning back this way when I go to cut it. So I'll cut it down there and I'll have a lever point that I can get it to go over backwards that way.
Most of them, if you're wanting to bring some growth down, is this more for overhead canopy or more to...
This right here was just to get rid of it.
Okay.
Because I wanted to get sunlight in here, and I wanted to stack all this debris in one spot to where I didn't have it spread out everywhere in here. And so you can see this here was already rotting out the inside, and so it wasn't going to make it anyways. a lot of times this is what I'll do. See how I've cut this one here above this limb? Now this limb's going to stay alive and hold this other stuff up. So most of the time when I go to cut a hinge cut tree, I might cut it off completely, but I want to leave one limb so that I got fast growth. But every one of these is going to sprout out right here around, right below this cut. And so it's going to bloom out and have 8 to 10 limbs. So in the future, with these 8 to 10 limbs here, if I drop another tree, it's going to land on top of all those. Now I got a fork here to hold it up. So, and then by dropping that other one on top of these small limbs, it's going to bend them over, right? And then they're going to grow sideways. Because again, in the future, I want all this stuff in here at this height, however I have it, and then just grow a couple of good trees. And I'd like to cut more of these oaks out of here. I mean, walnuts out of here in the future. I'd like to get these poplars out of here too, but it all depends on how Andy feels in the future. I don't know, just move around in here. You know, again, we're trying to make, see here, I got a trail down below this wall. So I got thick here, and then I got another access trail down there, and then I got thick again. So it's the whole scenario, it's over and over, thick, thin, so they can access around and get the sunlight all the way to the ground. The sun's the key, guys. I mean, it really is. That's the answer. We don't have to put much in here. The only reason I'm putting stuff in here is so I get fast and higher quality stuff in here. Most of the broadleaf plants are 6 to 8 to 12% protein. And our clovers, you know, are going to be up to 30%. So we're getting a little bit better balance for our protein, but also the protein that's in these plants is different than the protein that's in our clover. It's amino acid chains all put together, so all proteins are different. And so they are going to need, and we don't know what it is, they're going to need different types of protein. I went down to work in Texas to a high fence place, and he had like 30 bucks in there that was 3 years old. They were 170, 180 in this pen, right, all engineered deer. He says, when I take them out of this pen and I put them in this 600-acre high fence over here, they're going to gain 50 pounds of body weight immediately. I'm feeding them the best pellets that I can. I got the best vets coming out here. I'm spending all this money on these deer, and I don't know why it is, but they're going to gain 50 pounds of body weight at 3 years old as soon as I put them out here. And so there's stuff that they need that we're not smart enough to know what it is, and the sunlight gives them that as long as we don't have a monoculture of a certain plant in here. We just keep busting it up and getting our diversity. And invasive sooner or later will be bad. This is spice bush in here, and spice bush, I don't see them eat on it very much, so I like to knock it down, but other guys say, man, that's my best bedding is spice bush. But everybody has their own opinion on every plant out here, but they will eat on it if it's cut down low, and I like to use it for screening cover, and it grows back real fast anyways if you don't kill it. So most invasives, you got to cut 5 times in 3 years to kill them. So most invasives, I can cut them every year, keep them down in the deer's face. They can eat on them, but they just won't reseed. Midwest is low numbers right now. You know, almost everybody's complaining about deer, whether I'm in Nebraska or Missouri or Ohio or wherever it is. Nobody's got enough deer they're saying right now. Very few places do. That's the hunters thinks is enough. You know, Grant Woods, his number one thing is to go to the property, do a camera survey, come up with the number of deer he has, then 5 pounds of food a day for that deer in food plots. And I think it's a great idea, you know, to have a good estimate, because that way in 3 years from now you can have a pretty good idea of what it is. So I went to that class with James Crow. He put out all this paperwork, and he claims that no matter what your population is, if you don't kill any deer out of that area in 4 years, you will be overpopulated. It takes 4 years and you'll be overpopulated. And so that's scientifically proven. So again, to have an idea is, I think, is good, but you know, I think you can tell an awful lot by looking at the browse damage in the timber and looking at the photos and seeing how thin the deer are in the springtime. Another thing is, if your G2s on your buck is shorter than your G3s, typically that means that he's come out of the winter in poor condition and needs more nutrition early in the year when those first tines are growing. Usually the brow will be short right along with the G2. But you know, Grant Woods thinks I'm a tree cutter and I think he's a farmer, and so he tries to bait all the deer out to the open, and I try to work where the deer live. And so that's the reason I've decided to put more daytime food in here. And again, people might say, oh, you're spreading your deer out everywhere. Well, I'm not going to have a food plot in here. I don't want to bring a tractor in here. I don't want to till this up. But I want to give that deer what it needs year-round in that area. And then when I'm hunting in the 9th to the 12th of November, he's making circles. He's not staying in here no matter what kind of food's in here. So but everybody's different on what they're wanting.
So,
I'm talking chase phase of the rut, going through terrain features where he's on his feet for 20 hours a day for sure, and he's covering 3 to 4 miles every day. The camera thing, just real quick. You won't believe how many properties I go to where guys aren't getting pictures of their big deer, and I don't know how many people realize this, but deer hear a camera trigger and they look at it and then it takes the picture, and that's the reason that the deer is looking straight at the camera. It's not a blurry picture of it moving its head when the photo's taken. So when I was selling cameras, they had the regular flash, and then they had the infrared, and they had the black light and all this different stuff. Well, it's the sound of the camera that's making the problem. So there's a lot of deer that do not like the sound of a camera, and so they will not get a picture taken, right? And so they claim they got a silent camera out now. I haven't seen them or know anything about them, but the Plot Watcher Pro, out of those 3 million some pictures, one time I had deer looking at the camera, right? Out of 3 million photos, because it does not trigger. But of course I had them 10 foot off the ground, pointed at the ground too, which probably helps also. It's not in line of sight, but just because you don't have a picture of that deer on the property doesn't mean that he's not traveling through there. And almost everybody has mature deer traveling through their property because they're covering such big areas. What I love to see is one big food plot in the center of the property or close to is a holding plot, and have different strips of food all the way across that, to where we got high tonnage food like alfalfa, which is good at a certain time of the year, and then you got your clover chicory blends, and then you got your annuals. A lot of times they're going to produce more tonnage. And so then when you come in and tear up your annuals in the spring, you still have your perennials there to keep pulling the deer to the same pattern for a period of time. So I like to see a lot of different strips. If you walk by up here and seen the brassicas and what his luck has been on the turnips and radishes, we've decided we're not going to put turnips and radishes in anymore because they don't eat them, you know. And so you take up a lot of square footage on that. And it's a cheap seed, and they usually do good, but if they're not going to mess with them on the property, why keep fighting it over and over, you know? What is it, 4 years that you put it out and haven't had any success in 4 years on them? So, hey, let's move on to something else. There's a plant out there right now that has been on the QDMA site, and the guy told me about it 3 or 4 years ago, is sun hemp. And sun hemp looks like horse weeds, basically. It's going to grow, some of the species will grow 8 to 10 feet tall in 1 year. It doesn't take much nitrogen. It puts a lot of nitrogen in the soil. It gives you a good screening cover. And so you can take the top out of it and it'll bush out. So we've planned on going around the one plot all around the outside edge of it to get more screening cover and having tonnage of food with that. And so yeah, there's a lot of different options. There's a lot of different plants out there for specific times of the year. What I like to do is a food source trap with the beans on the edge of the property early in the year and plant them late to where we don't have any pods on them. So then when those die out, they're going to concentrate on the next food source, which would be chicory at a staging area the 3rd week of October. And then if you're needing to do a food plot hunt, you know, that'd be over your clover or chicory, in my opinion, the 1st of November. And then late season, I like to use corn instead of beans myself, but it's a carbohydrate for the cool weather. But a lot of people don't like it, especially if you're using a camera out there to video the hunt, because they can't see them in the corn as much as they can in the beans. So, you know, everybody has their different methods. I know if you put a food plot in, like corn or beans, and it's there for 3 years, it'd be good. Usually have enough food the first year, the second year maybe, but by the 3rd year, that's when they found it, and they're all coming to it. And it's rare that a bean field or a corn field, unless it's a lot of acres, has anything left for late season on the 3rd year. And there's fencers out there right now, non-typical, that do a half acre for like $300, and it's 2 different fences. I think there's a lot of use in that. Another thing you guys haven't seen on this property is fences to nowhere, snow fences or whatever, to concentrate the deer down in front of the stand. Tony the Pratt uses them. A lot of different guys use them. I think it's a great idea. Barbed wire fences, any type of fence. Don Higgins, he'll have guys put in warm season grass and wrap that with a fence, and then have a gate to where the deer can come and go out of that. You know, that's another great trap situation. So there's a lot of methods out there and a lot of different ways to do this, just depending on what you want and how easy it is to put it in.
The one success we have had, and this is going to be something we're going to do on all the plots this year, is in the late summer we're going to plant winter wheat and rye. I'm sold on that. From what I've seen and the amount of forage that it gives them going through the late season, we're just going to mix that. No matter what we plant, we're going to mix that right in.
The only thing I know of really is Alsite clover. It's a 2-year clover. That or that white Dutch, but the Alsite clover is, it can stand a flood when it's short. If it gets up 18 inches tall later in the year and it lays it down and rots it in a spot, it's not going to make it, but it's the best for wet season. They also got a Osceola clover out of Florida. There's a food plot company out of Wisconsin talked a lot about that. Kessler seed. I haven't used it, or I did, but I never went back to the property to see what the results were out of it. And so, but I've used that Alsite quite a bit in swampier areas, WRP, federal wetland properties. And again, you got to redo it every 2 years. That might be a situation where you want to wait until after the spring floods and come in and just do an annual. And that's what we learned out there in Iowa. We had 2,000 acres of crop ground all the way around it. We didn't need to feed them corn and beans in the summertime because they had plenty to eat. And so we focused more after it flooded three times the same year and took everything out. We decided we was going to go with annual after that, you know. So again, it's better tonnage and specifically for fall attraction.
I guess I'm flattered that you traveled that far. If you're from Iowa, raise your hand. There's 2 guys from Iowa. If you're from Missouri, raise your hand. No Missouri guys? Okay. Michigan. Now we got Jim. Anybody else from Michigan? Wisconsin. Look at the Wisconsin guys. We came a long way. Illinois. A lot of Illinois guys. Yeah, you're not Illinois. Indiana. Woo! All right, so we got a lot of the Hoosier State represented here. Ohio. Okay. Did I miss any states?
20 yards in there, go all the way to that box line.
I got busted by that rock right over there by where that post was. I was walking around.
I've been told, and it makes sense, is when a buck, all the buck's antlers, the calcium and everything comes out of its skeletal structure. So if the buck is wore down in health, where he's lost 30% of his body weight and he's super thin, he has to get back healthy again before he starts producing horns. And typically, June is your fastest month of growing antlers, and that's when you're going to get to the G3, right? Because they're going to come up and start growing brow and mass first at the base. And as that comes out, when he's in poor health, he doesn't have as much extras to be able to put it into his horns. Okay. And so the healthier the deer gets as it's coming out of the season, the longer those tines will be able to grow.
Makes sense. I've never heard that before.
I mean, again, I don't have scientific proof to say that,
sure,
but it makes sense to me.
Sure.
And the buck I killed this year had a shorter brow and a shorter G2, and I wish I would have known it. If he wasn't standing at 10 yards when he comes through the thicket, I probably would have had a little more time to study him.
To learn more of Jim Ward's Whitetail Wisdom, go to jimwardwhitetailacademy.com.